Good morning, everyone. I'm Rosemary Rung. I'm a state representative for District 21, which is Hillsborough District 21, which is the town of Merrimack. I'm chairing the PFAS Commission, which is a result of the HB 737 bill that was passed in 2019. So welcome. I would like to call the meeting to order at 10:01. And all of you should have received the minutes from our March meeting. I did notice, Mr. Wimsatt, in those minutes you had offered to send some documents to be included. I don't know if we got those or not.
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, good morning. There were hot links in that Word document that I sent to you, but I think when they got transcribed to the minutes, they disappeared. So I can resend that if that's helpful. But the Word document had several hot links in it that you could just click on and it would bring you to the document.
Okay, all right. Thank you. And Ms. Allen, what I'll do is I'll go and review that because I edited the minutes you sent. And thank you very much for taking minutes of that meeting. Mr. Dunn's taking them today. But if the commission's okay, I will add in those hot links. But I don't think that would prohibit us from approving the minutes as submitted, assuming that the hot links will be included. So I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Representative Woods. Is there,
just a couple of fixes. Yeah, there's a couple of fixes on it though, Rosemary.
Oh, okay, yes. Representative Healy?
Yeah, on HB, the line where it's Maureen Mooney's, Representative Mooney's on HB 478, it actually says Senate. It should say Senate.
Oh, Senate. Okay, thank you.
And on the second page, they misspelled Mike Wimsatt's name. So you just want to have that fixed too.
Okay.
Like the 5th line down.
Yeah. That's a habit of mine for some reason.
No, I just had it was added a D in there. Wimsatt.
Oh, okay. So then, and then I'm going to add DES's links. Are there any other corrections or additions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the minutes as amended, say aye, raise your hands.
Aye.
All right, we've got everyone. Any opposed, abstentions? Okay, the minutes pass. Oh, I'm
Representative
sorry.
Rung, I just will abstain since I was not present at the last meeting.
Oh, yes, thanks, yes. Oh, and I'm sorry, I need to introduce Michelle Rober. She is sitting in for Dr. Bush. Ms. Rober, would you like to just give a little introduction to yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to. Good morning, commission members. My name is Michelle Roberge. I'm the Bureau Chief for the Public Health Protection within the Department of Health and Human Services Division of Public Health Services. Dr. Bush serves as our administrator of our environmental health, public health tracking section, which sits within the Bureau of Public Health Protection. So happy to be here today and can provide an update and take back any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining us. I had actually intended to have a presentation by the new District 1 Administrator, Dr. David Cash, for today's meeting. And I sent the notice right after our March meeting adjourned, but unfortunately had a big runaround with that office. And apparently they don't give presentations to legislative commission. Who knew? So I'm actually going to raise that issue with our federal delegation. I think it's very important for us to maintain a relationship and keep updates with our Region 1 office. So we may see that on a future agenda. So I'm sorry we have that. That was supposed to be the next agenda item. Next month's meeting, Mr. Wimsatt is going to invite Catherine Beam from DES. She's, I don't know, is she Chief of Air Resources, Mr. Wimsatt, but she's going to give an update report on Saint-Gobain's air emissions RTO. Would that be a fair explanation, Mr. Wimsatt?
Yeah, she's not actually a director of the division. She's a bureau chief there. And forgive me, I don't know her exact title off the top of my head.
Oh,
But
okay.
she's
Doesn't
been very
matter, but
involved. Sure, she's been very involved in Saint-Gobain, issues. And yeah, she can make herself available for the next meeting to give a detailed update. And I do have an update. I usually get an update from her, so I'll have some somewhat more general information today. But then I've already spoken with her. She couldn't participate today, but she'll be available. She'll make herself available for the meeting next time for something more detailed.
okay, I
And
appreciate that.
if I could mention one more thing about the EPA, it was in my remarks, but it's probably a good time to mention it. So I was aware that you were unable to get a commitment from them to come and appear before the commission. We did attend, it was a very large PFAS science conference sponsored by the Northeast Waste Management Officials Association earlier this week. And the Deputy Regional Administrator, Deb Zaro, who's also leads a PFAS council nationally, so she's been very involved in this, did give a presentation at that conference that went into some detail on EPA's PFAS roadmap. Unfortunately, it was not recorded, but her slides have been made available. And when I send my update notes to you and Mr. Dunn, I will include a copy or a link to those slides that could be shared with the commission members. And if it would be desired, we could perhaps provide a review of those slides at the next meeting.
That would be great. I appreciate that. Thank you. We will do that. And then following the May meeting, excuse me, what I'm planning to do for the June meeting is to invite a representative from the Department of Education just to talk about any PFAS related impacts to their knowledge and knowledge of the research that affects learning capabilities of children that may be caused from PFAS. So that's kind of the future next couple months agenda, special presentations. If any of the commission members have another topic they would like to have on our agenda, just let me know. Thank you. And then we'll return to the agenda, and I'd like to turn it over to Representative Mooney for a legislative update.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, commissioners. The legislative session is almost at the end here. We're at the home stretch. Those bills that are due out of the Senate and out of the House are due by a deadline of May 5th. So as you can see, we are getting very close here to the end. As you may recall, we have 4 bills that are moving through both legislative bodies. And next week is going to be a very busy week, more specifically April 14th, a very busy day for 3 of those 4 bills. So those bills that will be heard in the Senate, having passed through the House on April 14th, are House Bill 1547, which is the soil bill. That's going to be at 10:30 a.m. in the Energy and Resources Senate Committee. House Bill 478, which is the bill related to filters in wells 4 and 5 of the Merrimack Village Water District. That Senate hearing also in Energy and Resources, April 14th at 11. House Bill 1185, Representative Rung's bill relative to the treatment of water. That is going to be April 14th at 11:15. So just to pause there for a moment, we're hopeful that as many people as possible from our communities will be at these hearings all in one day. If not, we ask that everybody sign in at the link provided either in the chart, or we can have it sent around, or upload your testimony that way so that we can have a good showing online for those who cannot attend these hearings. This is really the home stretch for these bills, and we're hopeful we can make our case like we did in the House in the Senate this time. The 4th bill that's gone through the House and now in the Senate is House Bill 1546. That had its hearing on March 29th. That was limiting air emissions. Representative Bill Boyd was the sole sponsor. So we're waiting on a Senate committee recommendation on that bill. And lastly, since we met, House Bill 1422 was recommended ITL by the Commerce Committee. And it was also that recommendation approved by a voice vote from the House on March 15th. So that bill was related to, I know, you just quickly check here, make sure that's correct. Right, that was related to labels on consumer products containing perfluorinated chemicals. And that then concludes my legislative report. I hope next month I have fantastic news on all of the bills mentioned in this report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Representative Mooney. Does anyone have any questions of Representative Mooney? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Mr. Wimsatt from DES. Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Mesmer has a question.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's not really a question. It's just a bill that may not have received any attention. It was Senate Bill 455, which was sponsored by Senator David Waters, which was voted in the Senate committee to ITL. It was intended to add the two PFAS chemicals that Massachusetts and Vermont already regulate with maximum contaminant levels in drinking water, and add the other one, which is the first chemical, the first PFAS chemical to come out of the treatment system in Merrimack. It was intended to support that effort to figure out a way to get coverage for the taxpayers on the remediation system. And unfortunately, that bill was voted ITL and it was killed on the Senate floor. And it was opposed by DES in the committee, unfortunately. So I just wanted everybody to be aware of that effort has been made to add a couple of more compounds to the list of regulated chemicals, PFAS chemicals in New Hampshire, that sort of caught us up to the two adjoining states.
Thank you, Ms. Mesmer. When we approach closer to the end of the summer, the policy committee and working with the other subcommittees will develop a list of legislative remedies and any non-legislative remedies that we want to put forward. And that would be a good time for us to consider resubmitting that bill, recommending it, so that it's in our report for November. So when the legislative calendar opens up in December for new LSRs, we can recommend that that gets filed. Yes, Ms. Mesmer?
I think this is really critical, especially with the recent news from EPA trying to parse up the list of PFAS chemicals that will be subject to regulation. I think it's important for New Hampshire to maintain its, near first in the nation status to deal with these chemicals that are affecting all of our communities in New Hampshire, or a lot of them in southern New Hampshire in particular.
Okay. Well, then maybe perhaps prior to that, or in August, we can have a specific agenda item on this so that we can get a report from DES about their position on it, and we can provide their input through Mr. Wimsatt on what we believe should be the path forward on expanding that list of PFAS chemicals. Okay, anything else? Okay, Mr. Wimsatt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So good morning, everybody. So the update for this month is that we have been very much actively engaged in ongoing negotiations with Saint-Gobain regarding provision of alternate water inside the consent decree. I don't have new news for you, but we're very hopeful that we will have news soon. With regard to water supply well sampling, we did receive a 14th addendum to the Saint-Gobain sampling plan last month, and that plan, well, well, obviously it includes additional wells identified for sampling inside the consent decree areas. So the tally numbers that we have for now, as of March 29th, when these were compiled, is that there are a total of 3,691 properties that have been identified for sampling inside the consent decree area, and that's 47 more than the last March report that I gave. And then 3,591 access agreements have been sent out. They've got a return rate on those of about 67%. And that's 123 more than in the March report. And then 2,192 samples have been collected from water supply wells. And that's 37 more than the March report. And a total of 964 properties have been offered bottled water inside the consent decree area, and that's 9 more than the March report. As I mentioned during last month's meeting, the majority of properties within the CD have been addressed by these 14, the work plan and the 14 addenda. There are about 200 properties that remain in the CD area that have not been sampled. And again, that does not include about 300 properties that have been disputed as being within buffer zones, as indicated by Saint-Gobain. We would expect that the 200 properties, which are mainly located at the periphery of the CD area, will be completed pursuant to additional addenda over the next few months. And important to also note that additionally, there are numerous property owners that declined to have their wells sampled after 2 notices from Golder Associates that could choose in the future to be sampled, and we certainly hope that they come forward. So there still could be considerable sampling to be done inside the consent decree area. As far as the site investigation goes, again, I've mentioned this a number of times. We're coming into spring here, and Saint-Gobain's consultant will be conducting stormwater sampling, for the first time in a post-RTO operational environment. And the timing of that is dependent upon, safety concerns working around the river. So we expect that during some rain event this spring that sampling would occur. As far as the air division goes, their update is that on January 6th, DES conducted an inspection of the facility in Merrimack to review records associated with the operation of the RTO, the frequency and duration of bypass operations, and the RTO temperature records since the startup last July. In addition, DES requested that Saint-Gobain submit records for the period of February 8th to the present. Saint-Gobain submitted an updated revised air permit application and air pollution control equipment monitoring plan on February 28th. That revised application would including the bypass in their temporary permit and the provisions associated with its operation. And DES is currently reviewing the records from the inspection and previously submitted responses to the letter of deficiency that it issued and the revised monitoring plan. Saint-Gobain has continued to submit monthly monitoring plan reports as required under their temporary permit and rainwater study results that are required under the consent decree. These documents I'll be including, again, as I usually do, in my written talking points and notes from this update to the clerk and to the chair, a link to those documents. So as long as that gets transmitted, you should be able to link to those documents and review them. And the most recent monthly monitoring plan letter from Saint-Gobain is dated March 14th. The results, the most recent rainwater study letter is dated April 1st, and that reflects samples taken in February. The results indicate measurements were below detection limits for nearly all PFAS analytes. However, for Concord, and keep in mind we have Concord, Nashua, in a plant site sampling station. For the Concord rainwater sample, there were 3 PFAS analytes that were reported: perfluorobutanoic acid, or PFBA, perfluorohexanoic acid, PFHXA, and PFPEA, fluoropentanoic acid. And they were all reported at concentrations that were, well, I'll just give them to you, and again, they'll be in my notes. For PFBA in Concord, it was 1.8 parts per trillion. For PFHXA, it was 1 part per trillion. And for PFPEA, it was 0.7 parts per trillion. And then for the Merrimack sample, there were also 3 PFAS analytes that were reported. Those were PFHXA, PFPEA, and PFOA. And they were all reported at concentrations below 1 part per trillion. They were, for HXA, it was 0.73. For PFOA, it was 0.71 parts per trillion. And for PFPEA, it was 0.52. It's important to understand that these concentrations, these results were in the lab reports, these were J-flagged. And what that means is that they were detected, but the concentrations are estimated because while they were concentrations that were above the minimum detection limit for the analysis, they were below the reporting limit. And that reporting limit is generally a number that is slightly higher than the detection limit, and it represents the number where the laboratory feels that they can reliably quantify and provide an actual numerical concentration value. So for all 3 of those analytes that were reported in the rainwater sample from Merrimack, the lab's reporting limit was 1.7 parts per trillion. And so, but the detection limits were down around 0.4 parts per trillion. So each of these were detected at around 0.7 or 0.5, which is above that detection limit, but below the reporting limit for the lab. And that's why they flag it as a qualifier on the data. So that's a little bit maybe finer point that you want to know, but I think it's important to understand that that's the range of concentrations that this is in. So as a result of initial comments from DES to Saint-Gobain on the stack test report for the September 2021 stack test, Bar Engineering submitted a revised stack test report at the end of January, and DES submitted additional questions to the company and Bar Engineering on March 1st of this year. And we received another revision to the stack test report on April 1st, so just a few days ago. And we are reviewing that most recent submittal and preparing a response letter regarding the stack test. So looking forward, I want to make sure it's clear that, you know, Air Resource Division is looking to complete the inclusion of the bypass in the current temporary permit. That's important because then they are anticipating getting a proposal for the second stack test, which is required to occur under the temporary permit in September of this year. They'll be getting the proposal for that. They expect to receive that in July, and they want the temporary permit to reflect the current configuration of the system before they get that. So a lot of work to do in these next few months to get prepared for that. And again, as I mentioned, probably Kathy Beam from the Air Division will plan to attend next month's commission meeting to provide a more complete update and to answer your questions. And I think that concludes my update.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wimsatt. Are there any questions of Mr. Wimsatt's report? Mr. Dunn? Oh, you're on mute, Mr. Dunn.
Sorry. Mike, thank you for all your work. I just want to let you know, people here in Londonderry now are, as they get their water, they're reordering their next supply because it's taking about 3 to 4 weeks. So I just want to let you know, I appreciate your effort to get an alternate supply. It will be much appreciated because a lot of people have issues with supply how much they can take at one time. So whatever you can do on that issue would be appreciated.
Thank you. That's very, very helpful to understand.
Any other questions for Mr. Wimsatt? I have one. You know, so Mr. Wimsatt, we've been doing testing within the consent decree area for years, right? When's it going to get done? I mean, I just can't imagine we're still testing private wells after all this time. And during that time, people may have had high PFAS concentrations.
Well, as I indicated, we're getting close, right? We have basically for if you don't count where offers have been made for testing and declined, and you don't count these 300 in the buffer. And by the way, on the buffer issue, we're trying to schedule a meeting with both Golder and Saint-Gobain to reconcile that issue. So we're hopeful of getting that reconciled in the near term here. But if you set those aside, because those one set is folks say they don't respond, they don't want to be sampled, and the other set is it's under dispute. If you set those aside, we're really looking at about 200 wells remaining, and now it would be our hope and expectation that those will be identified in the next few months for sampling. and that we would get those done. So it's been a monumental effort, as you can imagine. And as you can see there, I think the numbers are that even with, wells that have been declined and disputed, we're coming up on, we're sneaking up on 4,000 properties that were identified for sampling, which, and unfortunately, because of the nature of this, the fact that there are legal considerations here, the process that Saint-Gobain follows to do that is a multi-step process. It includes getting an access letter. It includes making sure that, the attorneys review any concerns that residents have, and then getting it scheduled for sampling. So, nobody's happy that it's taken this long, but we're glad that we're getting, towards the end of the road here inside the consent decree as far as getting people sampled.
Those 200 homes, have they received letters, permission letters? Or they haven't been in the process yet?
No, so what Saint-Gobain has been doing is following this sort of iterative process where they sample, wells that we agree are maybe the most urgent to sample. And then when they get the results from those samples, if they get detections above standards, they will then, draw this 500-foot radius around that and then identify additional wells for sampling around that. So that's the sort of iterative process that they've been following. And that's why the most of these 200 wells that haven't been sampled yet, haven't been offered sampling yet, are around the periphery of the consent decree, because they've more or less kind of been working from the most heaviest contamination, which is the area closest to the plant, and working their way out to the outer edges of the consent decree area.
Okay, so those 200, they've been identified as being within the 500 feet area?
No, they've been identified as being inside the consent decree. It's been our position that anybody, no matter who they are, where they are inside the consent decree, potentially has contamination as a result of the air emissions from Saint-Gobain. So it's our position that all of those wells, anybody who has a well inside the consent decree should get an offer for sampling.
Okay.
Where that has not happened is with these disputed areas. And then with these 200, I will tell you, we're still sorting out. I mean, I think there's some feeling on the part of Saint-Gobain that to the extent that those wells haven't been identified as being within 500 feet of another exceedance, that maybe they don't need to sample them. And that is not consistent with the agency's position. We believe that anybody inside the consent decree should be sampled.
All right, that clarifies it. I was just wondering if there were 200 that have already been identified but haven't been sampled yet. Identified as having, within 500 feet of a contamination. Okay.
Right. No, they have consistently followed that. So if any well that is located within 500 feet of a prior exceedance does get an offer for sampling.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Ms. Mesmer?
Yes, sorry, I sent ahead a bunch of questions I had late last night, so you probably didn't get a chance to review them yet, Mr. Wimsatt, but I just wanted to give them to you ahead of time. One of the first questions I have from today, though, is we had talked about how many private wells outside the consent decree area were above MCLs. Could you update us on that? The last count I have is 1,094.
Yeah, I apologize. I don't have an updated number for that, but I could certainly put that on my list for next time.
Yes, please. If you could put it in your notes too, that would be really helpful. And perhaps provide that every update now. So the other questions I had kind of deal with some of the things that Representative Rung brought up. So those, just to be clear, so those 300 plus wells that are in dispute with Saint-Gobain, have the property owners been notified that you believe that they may be impacted by Saint-Gobain?
If they are within 500 feet of a prior detection of an exceedance, then they've gotten a notification from DES. If they're not within 500 feet, then other than maybe being generally aware that they're inside the consent decree area, we've not identified them. We've not reached out to them and said that maybe you need to sample. So,
I think that, I would like to push back on that a little bit and say that, if DES feels that these people may be impacted by PFAS emissions from St. Gobain, that they should be notified. And then, you know, work with St. Gobain later to firm up the, you know, I'm not quite sure, because this has been going on for years now, right? This debate between DES and St. Gobain about this liability within the area. And to me, it's a bit disturbing that these people may, you know, we all like to think that everybody knows about this, but we often find out so many times that our information is really siloed, and breaking out of these silos is really important. And many of these people may not be aware. So they're continuing to drink the water, and perhaps they're not aware that DES considers them to be an area of concern. So I'm not sure if, you know, I would propose that if necessary, you know, maybe the commission support a letter requesting DES notify those homeowners. It's been years, I think, in many cases that these people, this has been under dispute, and that worries me a lot. So I would maybe perhaps bring that to a discussion later on. But my next question is around the 1,000 wells who didn't give consent to have their wells sampled. Is there any way that, you know, perhaps these properties have transferred hands, or perhaps they intend to be transferred? Is there anything that happens when a property transfer happens in this area that notifies the new property owner that an offer has been made that's not been taken up, or you know, something to that line, so that we don't miss all these people that possibly have just moved in, that the prior property owner was notified that they may be an issue, but for whatever reason they decided not to take up the state on that offer or Golder. Is there any way to catch those people?
That's a great question. I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, the answer is that no, we don't have any system in place to provide some kind of automatic trigger for a notification upon property sale. Now, obviously, realtors have a responsibility to make people aware of the location of the property in relation to you know, this consent decree area and the concerns. I don't think that happens very often, to be candid. That's not an area that I'm an expert in, but I think that it's important to understand that anybody who's inside the consent decree area, who for whatever reason has not had their well sampled, maybe it's because they're a new owner that didn't get notified and their previous owner declined to be sampled, would have the opportunity to be sampled. They would have an expectation that if they want to be sampled, they can be. We will be, you know, once we get to a further agreement here and start moving forward with additional remedies for people who are currently on bottled water, we're going to be doing a lot of outreach in the community, and I think that'll be an opportunity. We're really hopeful, actually, that once we have an agreement in place for provision of more permanent remedies for these folks who are on bottled water, we're hoping that our outreach will be able to reach these additional people and you know, kind of get some more people participating in that. I know that a number of communities sought our lists for those folks who had 2 notifications from Golder and still didn't respond. I don't personally know what level of outreach those communities did. I know they had a desire, thinking, and I think it was a good idea, thinking that maybe people who were reluctant to respond to a letter from St. Gobain's consultant might be more inclined to respond favorably to an outreach from their own community, from their own town officials. And I'll be honest, I've never heard what kind of response we got from that. But certainly we anticipate in the coming months that we will be doing a lot of outreach in the community, and we're really hopeful that that'll bring more people in. And again, it needs to be understood that there are going to be some people who just it doesn't matter how compelling things are. They're just for whatever reason, they're going to make a personal decision that they don't want their well sampled.
Perhaps this is something we should look at with policy, and perhaps even an amendment to one of the bills that Representative Mooney mentioned would be appropriate to pick up that transfer issue. A couple of more questions on the RTO and the air emissions issue. Just wondering, does the DES, you mentioned a January 6th inspection, does DES do regular routine inspections of the operation of that RTO? And also wondering what your approach to this bypass is in terms of, what is going to be an acceptable operation of that bypass for DES?
Yeah, I don't have any details on that, but I think that when Kathy Beam comes to update the commission at next month's meeting, I think that would be an appropriate topic and question for her to address.
No, are there regular inspections, or are you unaware of that?
I don't know. I'm not really
Okay.
privy to the air division's activities in that regard.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Allen?
So what bothers me about this is what we keep touching upon, the gap, the people who aren't being reached. And a few things come to mind. I like that there are some communities that reached out to you, but I think maybe we have to kind of circle back and formalize with them, because communities do have records of property transfers. And if we could kind of merge that together, either asking them to join, DES to compile a list of those communities, that's so important, because the state's position has always been, as is the case in other states, you approve a work plan and you have the responsible party implement that work plan, which makes perfect sense in theory, but how they're not going to go the extra mile. We know this. They're going to say, oh, well, 1,000 people didn't respond. So there has to be a way to pull in the lists of property transfers from the towns and maybe ask the towns to provide that list. Can we direct the towns to work with you? It bothers me if we ask them to work with Golder that, something gets lost in the translation. So that's one piece that is bothering me. And thank you, Ms. Mesmer, for, really driving that point home. It's so important to people. We see all the time on social media, someone comes to town, they're like, whoa, we knew nothing about this. What's going on? How do I get my water tested? So I am continually giving them the contact information, and they say thank you, and then they do that on their own. But a lot of people don't use, they don't even know these groups exist. How do they know there's a Merrimack water issues group? You would never look for that. You'd look for the community gossip group or something like that. So that's one piece. The other one is when we talk about that, the 200 homes and the various parts, those are people that I worry tremendously that they don't even necessarily know that they need to protect themselves, or the 1,000 homes that haven't been sampled. We really don't know what their level of awareness is over the harm to their family. And I know, speaking for myself and my family and looking what's played out health-wise, just in my household and people I know in my community, it's progressive. I would have loved to known way back when, even when UCMR3 was there, or water tested at, I think, 45 parts PFOA in 2013, 14, whenever it was. Boy, that would have been just a couple more years, that we could have done our own research and protected ourselves. So I'm trying to think how we can get at this. Is there a way that the state can send a letter out, because Saint-Gobain's not going to do it, to include maybe that either PFAS fact sheet that we have worked on, or link to the ATSDR consultation, or does that, I don't know if that jeopardizes your, cooperative partnership with Saint-Gobain. I realize it's a little dicey there, but I would love to find a way that we could get the facts out. We have some good links here with, it's not enough, but it's something. So those homes could have that information. So they would at least be able to protect themselves and their families while they wait for all of this to be resolved. And if they decide they don't want to, that's their business. But I just worry that people really don't, there's people who are highly educated at this point about PFAS who never thought they would be. And there's other people who really don't know. Back to that, we know these are tasteless, odorless chemicals. We still see people complain about water discoloration, which is due to flushing, or smells of chlorine, and that's not PFAS. We know that. So those are the things that I worry about, how to catch those folks that did sell and those new owners. I think we can do better by communicating, coordinating, and how to get some info fact sheets to everyone who hasn't responded, who is in limbo, so they at least maybe say, whoa, there's a reason that I need to follow up on this, right? That might give them a little more momentum.
Well, sure. Going to your first question about the transacted homes, I mean, at some level, that's almost really easy, right? Because it almost doesn't matter whether they've transacted or not. What the town could do, because I think towns have already attempted to do this, we connected them with Golder. Golder had the best data on this because they're doing this whole sampling regime, right? So we connected them with the towns, and they provided through Jeff Martz and making sure that we gave it to them in a format that they could process a list of the folks who had received 2, or the addresses, if you will, for folks who had received 2 notices and invitations to sample and had declined them or not responded. And what we could do is, with those same addresses, and that list can still be generated. We know what that list is. We could provide that to the town, and then to the extent it might take a little work on the town's part, so that if properties are transacted, they would presumably have, they send tax bills. I'm sure they're pretty good at that. So presumably they would have the mailing addresses, even if they're not the street address, the mailing addresses for the new owners, and then just do an additional mailing similar to the mailing they did before. That would put that. That's probably the most efficient and effective way to get notice out to those folks again. We'd certainly be happy to, provide, template language for the letter, and I think we have kind of worked the details out on that, anyways, in the first round. So I think that's a great idea. I think that'd be a good way to try to recapture for those homes that may have sold, get notice out to the new owner.
Ms. Mesmer?
I just want to follow up on that point just one more time. So in response to Rep. Rung's question about why is this taking so long, now we have a group of about 1,500 properties plus, between the 1,000, the 300 that are under debate, the 200 that haven't been sampled. And that, perhaps those, at least some of those, will result in another 500-foot step out. So we're continuing to, drag this, it keeps going and going and going. And so I think it's important for us to really follow up on these types of things. And just an example is, after the kidney cancer reports came out in the news, I got a call from a woman who lived in New Jersey who has kidney cancer. And she was unaware of the fact that her home that she had sold previously then tested above the MCL. So she called me just kind of saying, I have kidney cancer, isn't that weird? And I said, did you know your house that you formerly lived in for 25 years is above the standard? And she was unaware of that. So, this is really important, especially people that move away, people that move in. I mean, not everybody stays there for 25 years. So I just want to put a finer point on, how important this is to really make sure that we count these people, that we let these people know that these health impacts may be showing up, that can be handled before it becomes stage 4. So I just want to reiterate that.
And Mr. Wimsett, I had the same idea about using the tax bills. I think by the time they come out in May, later May, we can maybe work with the town, maybe Mr. Bendazian. I know Ms. Murphy wasn't able to come today, but we can talk to the town representatives on this commission to see if there's a way that the town can have an insert to the tax bill for those homes, or something that could be printed on their, if there's a macro written, that it could be written on their bill to provide notice, or call DES or something. But Representative Wood, did you have a question? Oh, Mr. Bendazian, I'm sorry.
Well, I would concur, Mr. Wimsatt, that it would be very helpful to have an updated matrix, and I would not isolate just new property owners. I would send letters out, if communities have already done it, to properties. Again, there's really no downside to doing that. So if there's an address matrix that can be produced again of those properties that haven't responded to 2 notices, so the towns can do mail merges, I think that would be great. So I also would encourage that. Just to your comment, Representative Rung, Department of Revenue Administration is very, very temperamental about what can be put on a tax bill. So I doubt that they would allow PFAS information, unfortunately.
Maybe we can put it on the envelope.
So, other than that, since I have the floor and Mr. Wimsatt's attention for a moment, I don't know if you can give us a time frame on low-hanging fruit that we've talked about from month to month. But, way back in the beginning of this commission, we had some people from the Department of Justice present, and they came and they said, we can't tell you anything because we were going through negotiations. But I think there may be some value in having them come before this commission to appreciate that communities really have some urgency to getting this done, so we can provide some permanent alternate water to people. And again, it may not be very productive other than impressing on them that this is a matter of some urgency. And then lastly, if there are other materials from that conference that we can be provided with links to other than the slides that you mentioned, Mike, that would be really helpful certainly to our subcommittee and environment.
Yeah, it was a remarkable conference. I think maybe one of the biggest PFAS conferences held. I mean, it was almost 600 people, 2 full days of 5-track concurrent sessions. I think there was something on the order of 110 presentations. And I believe that the slides for virtually all of those presentations will be made available on NMOA's website. So I can provide that. That's probably going to take them, just completed on Wednesday. So it may take them a little time to stand everything up and get it all loaded, but I'll be happy to provide that link. And there were not all, but some of, I'm not sure. I think a handful of the presentations may have been recorded, not many, but if there are, then they would presumably provide links to that as well. So yeah, happy to share that.
Thank you.
Any other? Yes, Representative Woods.
Yeah, a different topic, if we could. Just curious, we were thinking at one time, and it may be on the agenda, I don't have it right in front of me, the issue of expanding the consent decree area and whether that's still in progress. And sort of a secondary question was just out of curiosity, in the testing of the wells, have any of the wells been tested near the perimeter of the CD and such that the 500 feet overlaps and then extends outside the CD? If that occurs, what do you do?
Yeah, that has happened with some frequency,
Okay.
and DES has been doing, and that goes back to Representative Messmer's question about, what the numbers are outside the consent decree area, and they're large. They are, particularly in a number of homes in Bedford and many more homes in Londonderry in particular.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'll get those numbers for you, and we can make those part of the regular update.
And Representative Woods, I sent that letter to House Committee Services right after the same day our last meeting. I'll follow up. I'm assuming it went out, but I need to get confirmation on that.
Yeah, I'm just
I
kind of
needed
curious.
to have it printed on letterhead, House letterhead.
Yeah.
Senator Daniels?
Thank you. I don't believe that people are going to perceive the testing as being urgent until a deadline is set. Notification is sent to those that have not been tested or don't want to be tested and saying, you have until this date to have your property tested. Otherwise, you will not be included in, whatever mediation comes around. I mean, I see it very similar to some of these settlement suits I get from different stocks and things like that, that they say, you've got until this time to put in to be a claimant on that. Otherwise, you won't be included in any kind of solution to that. But if in doing that, number one, you'll get people to respond by the date that you've set. So, but that period of time, you've got all the testing done with a subset of those who didn't respond or don't want to be tested. But at least that narrows the subset of those that you can match against new residents coming in. If they, if someone comes in and buys one of those properties that has chosen not to be tested or whatever, they would still have the right to do that. But at least you're not working with such a large subset. But as long as you're not setting any kind of a deadline, as a resident, I could look at this and say, I have forever. to come back and determine
Sure.
that I tested.
Senator, that's a good point. I would note that it's a two-part story. So once we get this thing reconciled, there will undoubtedly be some homes that will, for whom the remedy will be connection to either an existing or an expanded water line. And in cases like that, where an entire street is going to be provided with a water line, and we have experience with this with the work we did in Litchfield and Bedford and Merrimack, that there would be a clear thing. If you want to be connected to water, you got to respond to us, and if you don't, speak now or forever, we'll hold your peace, kind of thing. It's a little bit of a different story in the areas where, for many people, a remedy will be a point of entry treatment system. And in cases like that, what I would be a little, I take your point, and I think there's a way to integrate that, but I would be a little bit reluctant to set a hard deadline for everyone, particularly for people who maybe, if we get on the other side of this and somebody buys the house and didn't know, if they've never been offered a remedy and they have never accepted an offer of sampling, then it would be our view that they're still entitled to sampling by the company to evaluate their water quality and give them a remedy, even if they're several years out. So it's not clear to me that the folks who are declining this are doing so out of sort of a sense of procrastination. I think it's more just some people just, they're interested in having someone come in and sample, and then other people are just not interested in that. And I'm not sure whether it's a deadline or the lack of a deadline that drives that, or if it's something else. But you make a good point, and for much of the work that will happen, I think that there will be a deadline for folks. So,
but I mean, I guess what I'm saying is all you're doing is trying to figure out if their water is good or bad.
Right.
I mean, find out if it's good or bad, at least then where you need to focus the remediation.
Right. No, absolutely. And again,
I'm understanding why we just can't say, okay, you're part of a suspected group that could be problematic. We need to test your water by this, otherwise you're on your own.
Sure. Yeah, and it's important to understand that once we get to the other side of a remedy here, where a certain number of people get connected to water and a certain number of people get point of entry treatment, there will be people whose wells have tested below standards, who may not get an immediate remedy, right, or any remedy. And but the expectation is on our part, and I think Saint-Gobain understands this, that there will be a pretty robust monitoring system for that network of wells that are not currently above standards, but potentially the water quality in their wells could change over time, and they could. So there will be a long tail of monitoring responsibilities that will go with whatever remedy we end up selecting. There will be continual and regular and periodic monitoring of the wells inside the consent decree that have not tested above standards at this point. So it's important to understand that as well.
Okay, Representative Healy and Ms. Mesmer.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I think the easiest thing to do if you're only talking about 200 people is just do a third notice. That way you don't have to go back to the towns. You don't have to go back and find the thing. It'll pick up the people that are new owners, put current resident on there. I think maybe that's not what it originally in the decree or request, but just do it again. What's it going to hurt?
The 200 are folks that have not been identified for sampling yet. It's the 1,000 folks who have declined the offer to sample.
Either one. It's going to be easier than trying to go back to the towns and trying to find all of the properties that changed hands.
We did talk about at a previous meeting when this issue came up is that the towns would send their own letter, that perhaps when residents get a letter from Golder, they disregard it. Maybe they don't want to have anything to do with Saint-Gobain, they don't know Golder, but people would be more apt to open a letter coming from their town. I don't remember, do you remember, Mr. Wimsatt? I think that did occur, didn't it? With towns sent out a letter?
I know that Jeff Martz was working pretty closely with the town officials in Merrimack and at least one other community, and I believe we were getting into the granularity of it to make sure they had all the information they needed to send that letter, and we will help them work on a template. text
I'll-
for the, but
yeah,
I can't
I'll check.
say I ever actually saw one of the, an example of one of those that got sent to somebody. So I can't say for 100% that it did happen, but it was certainly my understanding that it did.
Yeah, I'll check with Nancy Harrington because I think she led that effort
It
for
was involved.
Merrimack.
Yep.
Okay, Ms. Mesmer?
Never mind, I decided not to
Leaving you
comment.
off.
Okay, leave off, okay. Or any other questions for Mr. Wimsat? Okay, and I'll follow up with Ms. Harrington, Representative Healy. I'll get back, probably send everybody an email. Okay, nothing else. Let's move on to the update by DHHS. Ms. Roberge, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before I begin, I'm just going to apologize early because I have a bit of a cough. And so if I have to stop and put myself on mute for a moment to not to cough on in all of your ears. So I apologize right now. So to provide you some PFAS outreach and education initiatives, the department will be launching an updated website in May of 2022. It will include a dedicated page for PFAS. And this will include resources from both state and federal partners, such as New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and ATSDR. So stay tuned for that. That should be launching hopefully next month. This afternoon, Amanda Koser from the DHHS Biomonitoring Program will join Dr. Jonathan Patali from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, their Environmental Health Program, as part of a panel discussion on PFAS at the Northern New England Nurse Practitioner Conference. This panel is being organized by Peg DiTullio, who sits on the SB 85 Commission. Also, Representative Nancy Murphy will also participate as a community partner. And the goal of this presentation is to provide an overview of what PFAS are, existing guidance for clinicians, and education about community responses to discovering contamination. The department continues to receive some questions about blood testing, insurance coverage, and available labs to support PFAS blood testing. We respond to these concerns in a direct and timely manner with the information that we have available. The department's, the Division of Public Health Services Environmental Health Integration Team, which includes members from the Department of Environmental Services, formed a subgroup to discuss coordinated messaging on the topics so that we are sharing the most relevant information and accurate information with stakeholders. And DHHS promotes PFAS health messaging developed by ATSDR, including ATSDR's guidance for clinicians, and much of this information will be on our new PFAS website as well. So we'll have those links to ATSDR's guidance, as well as a new, the New Hampshire Department of Insurance developed a fact sheet on, insurance coverage for PFAS blood testing. So we refer to that as well. To give you an update on the Merrimack cancer investigation, we have been continuing to convene our cancer concern review team, that we call it the CCRT, to look at cancer data more closely for determining our focus for next steps of gathering information from people on residential history. At this point, I don't have a specific update to report regarding next steps. Our team meets next week and we'll discuss the next steps of the investigation. The CCRT has completed the assessment phase of the investigation, and these analyses will inform our next steps regarding feasibility of conducting an epidemiological study. So hopefully in the coming, next month, we'll have a more update for you on that. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot to offer today. And that's all that I have for updates from DHHS. I'm happy to answer any questions and or take back questions from the group.
Ms. Allen?
Can the Department of Health and Human Services, DHHS, can you do a mailing to these homeowners that we have identified, the 3,900 or 600, whatever it is, and can you give them the basic resources that we have? Because you do have a lot that's going on that website, and you do have various documents that were prepared, a fact sheet, ATSDR information. It would be, we have these three siloed components over the last few years. We have immense data that the state has done, investigative reports on one stop, just taking up gigabytes of storage there. We have what people experience and what they know their exposure is based on their own sampling information. And then we have the outcomes. And those three things stay so siloed, don't they? They stay in three separate columns. So if we could take that information that DHHS has and do a mailing to those folks that we've identified, both inside and that 956 or something like that homes outside of the consent decree area. Maybe I think it's over 1,000, 1,005. Those numbers are just bopping around my head. So we have an immense amount of people here who need that information. Is there a way that you can go back to your team and talk about how can we get that, mail list from whoever has it, Golder, whoever, DES probably has a copy of it, and do a mailing specifically so those homeowners can be supported by the piece that we don't talk enough about, information about PFAS, provider guidance, whatever we have, and protecting their health. That's what I would really like to see, us focus on.
That's a good point, Miss Allen. I would likely connect with the Department of Environmental Services and try to make, try to do this in a coordinated way as best as possible. So I certainly can take that point back. And just for clarification, are you referring to the 1,000? Are we back to that previous discussion with DES versus the 200 and the 1,000 homes that haven't been tested at this point? Is that what you're referring to?
Piece for people who maybe not realizing why they should be tested to have this information, because then they might say, oh, this could be a problem. They may not think it's a problem. There's not a lot of information out there, but it can't hurt to just do that to everyone, every single person, because the people who know this is a problem, who are getting bottled water, really need that support information. They need that information to take to their health providers. They need it to monitor themselves, because at the end of the day, it is up to individuals to say, hey, there's a little wonky symptom I'm having. Oh, gee, I've had PFAS exposure for many years. Maybe I better follow up on that with my practitioner. That's the way these things, unfortunately, get caught. It's by people having the information. So both inside and outside of the health decree, we have an immense amount of homes who we have identified on a list somewhere, and we know that they have had exposure to PFAS, and we know their wells have either been sampled, or maybe they're over, maybe they're under, but they still have had exposure. And then there's X amount of wells, whatever that number is, that haven't been sampled. So they all need that information. We are all in this area. We know the air modeling map, we know the groundwater data, and we know we are a PFAS impacted area of contamination and exposure, way more than the average in the nation.
I definitely will take that back, and I will certainly reach out to my partners over at DES as well, and we'll coordinate. If there is a mailing, we'll certainly coordinate with them, but I'll take your point back. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Ms. Mesmer.
Yes, thanks for that update. We at the SB 85 Commission, we heard an update from DHHS also on this matter with respect to the follow-up studies on the cancer. And many of us have expressed concern about the focusing in only on kidney cancer, because there were several other cancers that were borderline statistically significant. And we know that we don't capture everyone because they move in, they move out. Maybe we don't count them for whatever reason. They go someplace else. It takes 2 years for us to find out about that. So I would push back and ask again that we not only focus in on kidney cancer, but the other cancers that were elevated, like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and some of the other cancers that may reach statistical significance if we captured more people. Because we're going to spend a lot of time and money on this, and we're going to go survey people. And our experience on the Seacoast Pediatric Cancer Cluster investigation was, you don't get a lot of responses back. And so broadening that scope of the survey, we may next time find that non-Hodgkin's lymphoma does meet the criteria the state evaluates with. I contend that it's above other metrics, so that particular cancer is a concern of mine in the Merrimack area. So having, as long as we're going to go out and do all this work, having a more broader scope of what we're looking at makes more sense than realizing a couple of years down the road that we didn't do enough. So that's my comment on that. And I would ask them, if you're meeting next week, if you could take that back and say, let's not just focus in on kidney cancer, but all these other cancers that are borderline. That would probably be more efficient.
Thank you, Ms. Mesmer. I certainly will take that back. I'll just note that we follow a certain protocol, our cancer investigation protocol, which is very similar to CDC's protocol, in that there are certain criteria that we use when we look at our analysis. And certainly I can't speak to this in certainly detail and as well as Whitney can, and other folks, but I can certainly just let you know that there is a process that we use when we determine kind of next steps that mirrors a CDC protocol on cancer investigations. Some of the things that we look at are there enough cases and a large enough population for statistical stability? Is there a large enough numerator for statistical stability? Are there environmental contaminants and or events that could be related to these cases? Are there population issues that might in part explain the observed cancer excess? Has there been an increase in the incident rate of specific cancer over time? So those are some of the criteria, and I know Ms. Hammond, Whitney Hammond, provided some of that information in the meeting with community members, but certainly we will, as we move forward in this process, we will certainly be reporting back to the commission and the community on kind of our process and how we're outlining and how we are moving forward. But I certainly will bring your point back, Ms. Mesmer, to the team and make sure that that's heard and factored in kind of our decision moving forward. So
A follow up on that, please.
Yes.
Yeah, so I understand that, and I'm happy to hear that you look at things like increasing rates over time because, the state determined that kidney cancer increased, but also non-Hodgkin lymphoma did over that time period too, although it didn't reach statistical significance in the recent analysis. But, I hear that all the time about the procedures, and I know there's flexibility built into the ATSDR's recommendations on how to conduct this kind of stuff. So I would hope that flexibility is utilized in your assessment of how to move forward also.
I would briefly add that I know of 2 cases of non-Hodgkin lymphoma that have been diagnosed in the last 5 months. And we know that the data, the date of the data collection does lag behind what we see in our community. So I don't know how to address that, but that's a problem too, how to update this information.
Okay. Are there any other questions for DHHS? I have one. Ms. Roberge, we've talked a lot about cancer and studying the cancer rates in Merrimack, but does DHHS have any plans to explore the rates of non-cancer diseases that have been associated with PFAS exposure?
I mean, I think some of the challenges are whether or not we have data, what those, we'd have to identify what those are, and then whether or not we actually have data, surveillance data on what, whatever those health outcomes are. And, we have, the New Hampshire Cancer Registry has a robust data set, but we don't always track, we don't track every single health outcomes. So, we may not have data associated with some of those health outcomes. So, I mean, I think that's a limitation that we, depending on what those health outcomes would be, whether or not we have data to look at that. So I do think that's a factor.
Okay. These are some of the things that we may be able to answer through a legislative remedy in the fall to provide funding for it. Also, not jumping ahead, but when we do have a meeting with DOE, I'd like to also see how learning disabilities, particularly ADHD, others that are associated with PFAS exposure, track in communities where we have had documented contamination. Yes, Ms. Mesmer?
Representative Wrong, in response to that, those are all really good questions, and that is the running subject of the SB 85 Commission, which I was just elected chair last week to. And we have been trying to get DOE to come as well to our commission, and I'd like to suggest a joint commission meeting if we can get to someone from DOE to answer this question. So the SB 85 Commission is trying to create, to gather up all the systems in the state and figure out where the gaps might be, and being able to track not only cancer, but chronic, environmentally triggered chronic disease, and create dashboards for the state to use to track these kinds of chronic conditions. In the end, the goal is to have the state be able to track them. We kind of learned a lot through the COVID pandemic about what is there and what isn't there and what needs to be there. So I think it's a good step in the right direction that there's some of these changes that are being made with respect to PFAS on the state's websites and things, but we do have a ways to go. And anybody that's interested in this issue, absolutely come to the public meetings of the SB 85 Commission and watch and have input into those meetings, because this is really critical, I think, in this state to be able to track environmental exposures and chronic disease outcomes.
Okay, and we can talk offline about having a joint meeting. That would be great. All right, thank you. Any other questions for Ms. Robers? No, thank you very much. I appreciate your participation. The next agenda item is subcommittees. Are there any subcommittee reports to bring before the commission? None. Okay, I just want to remind the subcommittees what the process is, because I know it can be really confusing. And those of us that have been on this for a while, we forget that there's others that may not be aware. But all subcommittees have to be publicly accessible. They can be in person, or you can use this platform. Amy Russo from DES has been phenomenally helpful. She is very eager to help set up these meetings, but they have to be publicly accessible. The work of the House is winding down a little bit. We're just having hearings and executive sessions on Senate bills. So there is more accessibility to hold face-to-face meetings. But as long as the meeting is publicly accessible, we can still use the GoToWebinar platform through DES. But any meeting, all subcommittee meetings have to be public. They also have to be noticed in the House calendar. To do that, they have Heather Goley, who is the committee assistant that supports our commission. She has to be notified by Wednesday evening of any meeting. And there's typically at least a 5-day notice. So you can't just set up a meeting for the end of the week. You have to be able to have it noticed by a Wednesday of 1 week, and the earliest you can have it the following week. I think you could have it any time the following week, but it has to be in the House calendar on Thursday. That comes out on Thursday. But if you have any questions, you can please get in touch with me or get in touch with Amy Russo, or I can get you in touch with Heather Goley as well. I did take some notes during today's meeting that I think it may be worthwhile for the communications subcommittee to meet. And I do have an addendum to that roster that I sent out a couple meetings ago. Ms. Mesmer is part of the communications subcommittee. I'm sorry, Ms. Mesmer, I forgot to add you to that. But I do see the communications committee could really address how do we communicate to those 1,000 homes, the people that have not replied yet to get permission. I think that the communications subcommittee can really kind of get into the weeds and maybe work with the town representatives on what that's going to look like. I think they can also have a role in just the last conversation we had about blood testing and making sure that we cascade that information from DHHS about the blood testing insurance, things like that. So maybe the towns can have like that, make sure they include all that information on their PFAS pages on their sites. So that I think there would be a robust agenda for that committee, the communication subcommittee, and then they can report back recommendations or needs or whatever back to us at our May meeting. Any questions about that? Well, okay. So I would encourage the communication subcommittee to meet this month. And, we added public comments to our agenda when we started meeting face to face, but the public really doesn't tune in. Oh, another thing, I did see a comment by Ms. Russo that Mr. Ayotte has been part of our meeting. He just hasn't been able to join with video. So he has been participating on audio. So that would be something, Mr. Dunn, you'd want to make sure is in the minutes. So we don't have public comments, but if any of the members of the public have reached out to commission members with questions or comments, you can use this time to share what those are. The only thing I hear at a continual drumbeat is how long do I have to be on bottled water? So that's a big thing. People have been living with this for a long time. And you can just take that under advisement, Mr. Wimsatt. So I'm sure you hear it too. And then as far as our next meeting goes, a couple things is I did mention that the LOB is becoming more accessible. We've been getting along fine, I think, meeting virtually on GoToWebinar, but if anybody wants to return to face-to-face meetings, please let me know. But unless I'm probably going to keep it like this. I think it's kind of convenient. It saves a lot of travel, saves a lot of gas, a lot of time. But if anybody feels strongly, as long as we're in compliance with a couple statutes on public meetings, we're good to go. So, but if anybody does want to meet face-to-face, just let me know. And then the last thing for today is our next meeting, which is the second Friday of May, is May 13th, Friday the 13th. So I would say 10 o'clock, we would schedule it. If you're unable to make it, just send me a note. But I will ask Ms. Murphy and probably Dr. Bush to give an update on the Nurse Practitioners Conference. Mr. Wimsatt obviously will have his report, and we'll have our big thing will be a presentation by Kathy Beam from DES. So, is there anything anyone else would like to say before we adjourn? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Oh yes, Ms. Mesmer.
One follow-up item, we had asked for, at least I had asked for a couple of times back, sensitivity analysis of the cancer from DHHS. And they had said that it was going to be covered at the public meeting, which I don't believe it was. So I want to ask for that again, of their cancer analysis, when they said there was no difference when compared to the national levels or something like that. So I'd like to hear about their sensitivity analysis on the cancer rates.
Ms. Roberge, would you ask Dr. Bush to include that in her report next month?
I will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, anything else? Okay, I'll accept a motion to adjourn made by Ms. Mesmer, and the second is by Mr. Dunn. All those in favor of adjourning, please raise your hand. Okay, we are adjourned. Have a great weekend, everyone, and thank you. And thank you, Ms. Russo.